I'm calling it a digital prison. I'm referring to what's happened just yesterday with the news that Companies House is to introduce a new verification scheme for identity. Of course, the word verify creeping into virtually everything that pertains to online or digital activity, as though in some way it confers the idea of security, which is the one of the main selling points. But the reason for describing it as a prison is it seems that the walls are in effect closing in, or there is an attempt for the walls to close in from directions over which people have very little control. So, of course, Companies House is the conduit that draws people in who are going to be conducting any sort of business activity, at least in the first instance, where they're incorporating their organisation, and indeed they're going back to Companies House to file all the various documents that are required over the course of the year. So it should be made clear that, first of all, this is not going to affect the records that are already on the Companies House book, but this will take a future effect. And the reason that this is happening is because of the Economic Crime and Corporate Transparency Act going back to 2023. Now, it really has a rather misleading title, as I'll go on to articulate, but it said that the role of the Act was to reform the role of Companies House and improve transparency over UK companies and other legal entities to strengthen our business environment, support our national security, and disrupt economic crime. Now, I think it's questionable as to whether any of those things will be achieved, certainly not all of them, and certainly not via the mechanism of that particular piece of legislation. But there will be certain other consequences, which I would imagine are fairly predictable and therefore have been engineered into the system, one of which is reported by the UK cybersecurity sectoral analysis of this year, published quite recently by the Department for Science, Innovation and Technology. And of course, no great surprise, but the industry has swelled by over 12% in the last year and now delivers a return of just over £13 billion. And I think we can expect an exponential increase there. And of course, the important point to note is that many organizations in that field are in effect covering both sides of the fence by saying that they're going to provide the security, but also providing the systems themselves that require the security. So it's all fairly well covered off, one might say. Now, this obviously relates to the notion of digital identity. I just think it would be worth remembering the facile terms in which the government put their message for this in order to try to convince people that it was a good idea. So here's Peter Kyle, the Minister for the department we've just been speaking about, trying to advertise this product.
Right, mate?
Hi, mate. Can I get a pint of lager, please?
Yeah, of course. Can I just use my details?
Yeah, no worries.
It's got it somewhere in here. Hi, can I have a pint of Christmas cracker, please?
Certainly.
I know it's a surprise for everyone, but I don't get asked for my ID anymore. But for loads of young people, they get asked all the time when they want to buy a drink. So we're changing the law so that next Christmas, young people will have their ID on their phone, so they won't have all of the hassle of needing to get ID or leaving their ID at home, or their paper ID getting lost or damaged. There's already 50 digital apps like this one. But what it means is that bar staff can scan to prove somebody's identity, and it doesn't give away any personal information. So it means that giving your ID is safer than it's ever been before. Changes like these are going to create economic growth for our country, which is key to our plan for change.
There you are.
Great, thanks. You can put it on the tab. So this means by next Christmas, buying a pint will be a little bit easier.
Well, I'm not sure if it would have been able to cram any more untruths into such a short video clip, but he had a fairly good go at it. Of course, first thing to note might be that the government minister didn't try to help a member of the public who just dropped something right next to him, which I thought was quite indicative. But the point is that he is really honestly trying to make a case for security and convenience versus the possibility that you might occasionally drop something that is physical on the floor, and that's really his only selling point. But this is the direction that we are to be consistently pushed, and that's why this verification scheme that Companies House is trying to roll out is just yet another trap by which people are going to be ensnared and forced into something that really has absolutely no benefit and plenty of risk. And that's what I want to go on to talk about, because a report has been published by Thales, of all people, the defense business, of course, who stand to gain in this theatre. And they've constructed a report where they say that they're concerned about digital identity storage on mobile telephones. Of course, exactly what Peter Carl's been talking about. But he's suggesting, they're all trying to suggest that because it's digital and there's a biometric security verification, that it therefore is impregnable, which could not really be further from the truth. And so this is referring to people who've got images stored of identity documents, and therefore there's a low security threshold there, and therefore there should be a mechanism by which we're able to deal with that via this much vaunted idea of digital ID. And so let's just have a quick look at some of the companies that are involved in this space and will be holding some of the infrastructure that we are supposed to rely on, one of them being Capgemini. And here's a piece from Hedgehog talking about 20 gigabytes of sensitive information having been stolen. Now, the reason I've highlighted them is because I put in a Freedom of Information request to the Ministry of Defence recently about the veteran ID card in order to find out who's going to be dealing with the data, because it certainly isn't going to be the Ministry of Defence. And as seen on screen now, it says the main third-party provider of support to the development of the digital card service is a company called Capgemini. So it's a fail for them. The next one we look at is a data breach reported here by Barings Law. And in this instance, we're talking about Shared Services Connected Limited, SSCL. And again, in response to the Freedom of Information request I put in, they state, the Ministry of Defence state that personal information of veterans applying for the digital veteran card will be processed and held by Shared Services Connected Limited. So they don't get it right either. Next, of course, and entirely probably, the whole Companies House infrastructure is run by Amazon Web Services. So first of all, we've got the enormous conflict of interest when we're looking at transparency and how companies actually conduct their business. And it's worth noting that Amazon paid no corporation tax between 2020 and 2024. And yet here they are providing the very basis upon which Companies House is trying to build all this nonsense. So we then see that Amazon Web Services, of course, certainly many government services on the back of it, but they've had plenty of breaches as well. So that doesn't work either. And I think it's beginning to look increasingly like dropping your wallet on the pub floor might be the best possible outcome. And just to round this off, it's worth noting that all this goes full circle, because if there is an issue with this, who do you get in touch with via the outsourced contact center service? None other than Hinduja Global Solutions, and they are indeed part of the many businesses that the Hinduja brothers involved in the 2001 cash for passport scandal with Peter Mandelson refers back to. So really just an absolute nest of incompetence and dishonesty, and frankly, what should be another nail in the coffin of digital identity.
Thank you, Charles. Thank you for that. Now, let's move to the Middle East then.